The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's get us up to speed as we can on the situation in Paris, the Paris massacre, the attacks at Charlie Hebdo, the satirical magazine. The manhunt continued for the two brothers that were believed responsible for the massacre at the Paris, France office of Charlie Hebdo. Another gunman took hostages at a kosher supermarket near Porte de Vincennes. Police conducted simultaneous raids in the two locations. 3 terrorists were killed. Some hostages were injured or killed. And French President François Hollande confirmed that 4 hostages were killed in the supermarket, and the prosecutors said that they were killed before the police intervention. There is a potential additional suspect that is still considered to be on the run. The Porte de Vincennes terrorist was in telephone communication with the Kouachi brothers, which were the 2 at-large suspects from the original Charlie Hebdo shooting in Paris. The latest numbers, and these numbers are quickly evolving, and we're doing the best we can to keep up with the latest information, are that a total of 20 people were killed at 4 locations between the 7th and 9th of January, including 3 suspects. At least 21 others were injured, some critically, and this marked the deadliest terrorist attack in France since 1961, when there was a train bombing by the OAS. On the 9th of January, Mehdi Koulibaly, armed with 2 AK-47 assault rifles, entered and attacked a kosher supermarket at Porte de Vincennes in East Paris, killed 4 people, all of whom were Jews, and took several hostages. He had a female accomplice, speculated to be his wife, and I believe, Lewis, that at this point, that is the lone outstanding suspect, but the information is changing so quickly.
It is quite a series of events. It's really unfortunate, but I guess we can find some solace in the fact that they got the majority of the people they were after here.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but I would really prefer that more of these situations not end with the suspects dead before there can be, first of all, there can be a debrief of some kind so we can more understand, rather than having to figure out from sometimes the seldom left manifesto what it was that led up to and resulted in these heinous acts, and also so that they can be brought to justice. And of course, I'm not saying I would have rather them not be killed and allowed to kill more people. That is not at all what I'm saying, but merely that so often we never really get to have any kind of debriefing of who these people are and what and why this took place, which I think may be useful in preventing incidents like this in the future.
Perhaps. I think, of course, in this individual case, it's pretty clear why they attacked the Charlie Hebdo. The supermarket, who those other people were, how they were all related. I'm sure we'll figure all of that stuff out, but certainly, yes, if they were captured alive, there would be valuable information to extract.
And we do know some of the connections because it was later confirmed that the gunman at the kosher supermarket was also the gunman in a shooting in Montrouge that occurred the previous day. That's the shooting that left a female police officer dead. So we certainly know that there was this connection operationally, but certainly ideologically, we can guess as to what the connection was there. It doesn't really take a genius to figure that out, but certainly there would be much more to be learned. The media coverage of the Charlie Hebdo massacre in Paris and that of the killing of a municipal police officer, as well as the hostage situation and shooting at a kosher supermarket, the media coverage has ranged from sober and salient and reserved to absolute just making stuff up. And I'm sure it will come at no surprise to you that this was particularly prevalent on Fox News. I have here Steve Emerson, supposedly a terrorism expert. And if you're an expert in terrorism, presumably you know basic facts about the countries that you're analyzing. Steve Emerson going on Fox News claiming that everyone in Birmingham, UK, in Birmingham, England, is a Muslim. This is what he had to say.
zones. There are actual cities like Birmingham that are totally Muslim, where non-Muslims just simply don't go in. And parts of London, there are actually Muslim religious police that actually beat and actually wound seriously anyone who doesn't dress according to religious Muslim attire.
I mean, this is just a lie, right? This is just not accurate. Christianity is the most prevalent religion in Birmingham. 46.1% of the Birmingham population is Christian. 21.8% is Muslim. And 19.3% of the Birmingham population is non-religious. There are almost as many non-religious people in Birmingham, England, as there are Muslims. And there are more than twice as many Christians in Birmingham as there are Muslims. Apparently that didn't matter because we needed his expertise on terror, and presumably that was predicated on just making stuff up about the cities he's discussing.
Not as shocking. You know, his numbers here weren't as shocking as him saying that there are Muslim religious, there are police who are Muslim religious police who go around beating people in Birmingham who don't dress properly. Now, you know, I don't
in
live
London
Birmingham.
Actually, that he meant that the beating, I think he said, was in London. In Birmingham, it's all Muslims, and in London, you can be beaten for not wearing the right Muslim attire.
Even if you're not Muslim. If you are a Christian in London, can you be beaten by the Muslim religious police for not wearing proper Muslim attire?
Lewis, you're asking all the right questions, and it makes me, I would say we should ask a terrorism expert about that, but they did on Fox News, and we just got made up numbers. Like, for example, everyone in Birmingham is a Muslim. He did eventually, I guess, kind of apologize, but how does this happen? I just don't understand how you even get to the point where you say, hey, you're a terrorism expert. Come on and just make stuff up. It doesn't even matter.
I don't think they care. I think they don't say, let's find a terrorism expert. I think they say, let's find a terrorism expert who will say exactly what we want them to say or something similar. And they don't really care who that person is or what they've accomplished.
Anonymous, the online hacktivist collective, has claimed its first victim in Operation Charlie Hebdo. Anonymous is this online hacktivist collective. We've interviewed numerous individuals involved with Anonymous on this program. And late last week, they pledged to avenge the attack on the Charlie Hebdo offices by rendering jihadist websites inaccessible. The group published a video to YouTube through its Anonymous Belgique channel, as well as a statement posted to Pastebin. And shortly thereafter, the group claimed the first victim. The group claimed over the weekend to have hacked the website ansar-al-haq.net. In 2013, French newspapers described this website as a French jihadist website. It was down for more than an hour after Anonymous's announcement. It later returned online, and Anonymous's usual weapon of choice, Lewis, is a cyber attack known as the DDoS attack, distributed denial of service attack, which basically means you flood a website with traffic such that the server it's hosted on can't keep up, and it takes the website down. It is not the most sophisticated type of attack. It can be effective, and in this particular case, Anonymous claiming credit for taking down that jihadist website.
This is going to be an interesting battle if it keeps up. If Anonymous is going after jihadist websites worldwide, they are going to have their work cut out for them because there is plenty of that.
This was exactly my thought. We, of course, don't condone or encourage any illegal activity, but as a bystander to this, the idea of Anonymous versus the jihadist online community, and we know that with ISIS and other groups, social media and the internet are increasingly important in terms of their recruiting and kind of divulging their message. That could be quite an interesting heads-up battle that could be forming here.
I think so, yeah. This is something where we're going to want to follow pretty closely.
Don Lemon brought on a Muslim human rights attorney and asked him if he supports ISIS, in spite of the fact that there was no evidence to suggest that this individual, Arsalan Iftikhar, supported ISIS. And there's a lot to discuss here, Lewis, because there were knee-jerk reactions from both sides in response to what happened here. And I think that the reality happens to be far more nuanced because of what was said. So let's start at the very beginning. Here's Don Lemon talking to Arsalan Iftikhar about a poll that found 1 in 6 French people supported ISIS, okay? And he asked the question of Arsalan Iftikhar once, and Arsalan Iftikhar didn't really answer the question. And then Don Lemon says, seemingly unprovoked, do you support ISIS? Let's pick up the video and audio there.
I understand where you're going with, but I just want to get a more specific. Again, in August, 16% of French citizens support ISIS. Would you describe those who support ISIS as Islamic extremists? Do you support ISIS?
Wait, did you just ask if I support ISIS? I just answered your question. I said that obviously these 16% of people support the ideology, but again, I don't think that that would necessarily extrapolate to supporting of killing of innocent people. You can have sympathy for an ideology and not, you know, support the mass murder of people. And that's what the vast majority of the Muslim street, whether you're dealing with Paris or Islamabad or Jakarta, you know, we're as horrified as everybody else about what happened today, and we grieve with the victims and with the people of Paris.
All right, so Arsalan Iftikhar, he happens to be a Muslim. He's a human rights attorney. Why is Don Lemon saying, do you support ISIS? If there was an incident of Christian terror, in fact, we have stories this week about a Christian militia who was planning to attack police. Would you bring on a random pastor and say, do you support this right-wing Christian terror against police? We would say that doesn't happen. There's this clear double standard. So do you agree, Lewis, with the first part, that it was kind of an odd question for Don Lemon to ask?
Well, it depends on the context. I do not think it was, when we get into the follow-up here, I think it's going to be clear why I don't think that it was a strange question to ask. I think it was an important question to ask.
Once I looked at the follow-up and the answer from Arsalan Iftikhar, I also had a change of heart. I had a knee-jerk reaction of how dare Don Lemon, the guy who asked one of the Bill Cosby accusers why she didn't just bite Bill Cosby's penis during oral sex, and engaged in all sorts of weird stuff when he was covering the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson. I also said, oh, another Don Lemon bizarre question. But listen to the specifics of what was said. Arsalan Iftikhar kept talking about people who support ISIS's ideology, but not the murder of innocent people. And if I were Don Lemon, I would have followed up and said, hold on, Arsalan Iftikhar, explain to me how you could support the ideology of ISIS, which supports the killing of apostates and the killing of non-Muslims and Westerners. How can you support that ideology, but not what the ideology says, right? That would have been my next question. And when he did ask Arsalan Iftikhar, do you support ISIS? Arsalan Iftikhar said, I answered the question. These 16% of people support the ideology, but again, I don't think that you could necessarily extrapolate that to the supporting of killing of innocent people. You can have sympathy for an ideology, the ideology of ISIS, and not support the mass murder of people. So I had this reaction that the question was presumptive and that there was a double standard there. And when I didn't hear an answer from Arsalan Iftikhar, not about that, but even about the poll that made sense, I actually started thinking, wow, maybe Arsalan Iftikhar does support the ideology of ISIS, which is incredibly hateful and xenophobic in nature.
You cannot support the ideology of ISIS and say that you oppose the killing of people. They are not two separate things. The ideology of ISIS is to kill people.
Absolutely.
To kill massive amounts of people. And so you cannot separate the two. That's impossible. It's illogical. It makes no sense. And clearly, I think he does support ISIS. I think it's clear that he thinks that he supports their ideology and maybe not the killing. He couldn't even come out and flat out say, no, I do not support ISIS.
Now, I'm going to take Arsalan Iftikhar at his word that he may well believe that you can support the ideology of ISIS, but not the killing of innocent people. I just don't know how you explain that, and I would be open to hearing an explanation of that. But to say, I support all of the stuff about ISIS that is about Islamic scripture, but not the violence. Well, then you don't really support ISIS. You just support the doctrine of Islam, and you don't even have to talk about ISIS, right? So I'm trying to figure out in my mind, Lewis, how those two positions could actually exist without being mutually exclusive. So what started off as a very bizarre line of questioning from Don Lemon, admittedly, ended up with me saying, wait a second, going from, of course he doesn't support the ideology of ISIS, to wait a second, I think he says he does. I think he does support the ideology of ISIS. Send me your thoughts on this very controversial clip. Twitter.com/dpacman. Tweet me, follow me. We'll be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
This program is mostly funded by you, our audience, through the David Pakman Show membership program. And today's new member of the day is Eric Natov. Eric Natov, I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. There's an H at the beginning. I don't know if it's completely silent or somewhat silent, but in any case, I am sure of the first name. Eric, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. And you can join Eric in his support of our program, which is really what our future depends on, by going to davidpakman.com/membership and signing up today. Not only will you be supporting the show, you also get a bunch of extra premium programming for members only and a lot of other great member benefits. If you ever do any shopping on Amazon.com, you can first go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page. Then, when you do your Amazon shopping, we get a little kickback. You take a little money away from Amazon and send it to us, and it doesn't cost you any extra. I recommend bookmarking that link and using it whenever you shop. Several people, Lewis, over the last week from our audience, streaming Archer episodes. I recently got into Archer. I guess you could say it's a spy cartoon, an adult spy cartoon with the lead character voiced by John Benjamin. It's a hilarious show. I love it.
It is a pretty solid show. I've only seen maybe 1 or 2 episodes. I haven't really got into it like you have, but I did think those 2 episodes were funny, yes.
Also, a blast from the past from our studio in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Somebody ordering a bulk package of Aloe Awaken aloe vera beverages with wheatgrass. When we were up at the studio in Greenfield, Massachusetts, Lewis would get various drinks before each show. And very often you would get this aloe drink, sometimes the one with wheatgrass, and then sometimes, if I recall correctly, Lewis, I don't want to speak out of turn, the one that had honey.
Yes, frequently I would get these drinks. They're delicious. I don't know what else to say about them. They are very, very tasty, but you know, still, of course, they contain a bit of sugar. So
yeah. Lewis had me get one
in
once.
moderation.
Lewis had me get them a couple of times, and there's one of these that had like pieces of aloe in it. And it was like a sugar drink. I mean, it's probably as bad for you as soda, maybe not quite as bad, but it was very, very tasty. So congratulations to whoever has ordered a bulk package of one of Lewis's favorite drinks, the aloe vera beverages from Aloe, A-L-O. And lastly, a lot of textbook orders starting to come in. If you're ordering your textbooks for the spring semester, remember that you can divert some of that incredibly exorbitant cost of college textbooks to supporting independent media if you do your Amazon shopping after clicking on the Amazon banner at davidpakman.com. We have to talk about something really important here because every time we see a knee-jerk anti-all Muslims reaction when we see an instance of terror like that with Charlie Hebdo and the kosher supermarket, the kosher market in France, there is this knee-jerk reaction that the problem is Muslims, period. And I want to dissuade you from having that knee-jerk reaction, not only because it is factually wrong and unethical and xenophobic and immoral, but because it helps the extremist terrorists. And I'll explain to you exactly why. Extremist terrorists of all kinds, and this applies to Muslims, this applies to Christians, this applies to all extremist terrorists that are based in religion. They want the general population to hate all of their religion. In this particular case, we're talking about Islam. The terrorists want their entire religion to be branded as backwards and medieval and oppressive to women and oppressive to LGBT people and whoever doesn't fit in, because this us versus them dichotomy that's created will actually drive more Muslims to become people who sympathize with the extremists. Because if you can convince moderate Muslims or moderate Christians or whoever that, hey, the whole world is against you because of your religion, that is going to drive some portion of those moderate Muslims towards being radicalized. And we saw this when it came to going into Iraq after Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11. And it created a whole group of people who said, wait a second, we weren't even responsible for these attacks. And they're coming in here and they're killing hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, unclear how many civilians. That is something that can further radicalize individuals who otherwise wouldn't be. So we need to remember that the being against all Muslims ideology is something that is not only a knee-jerk reaction we should avoid because it's wrong, the terrorists benefit from that, Lewis.
Agreed. And you said that Islam is not the problem. You're right. Religion is the problem. There are still going to be plenty of people who think Islam is the problem, but we're not going to get rid of Islam. We're not going to get rid of religion. So we need to try and find a way to avoid this type of reaction and to avoid breeding hate. Absolutely.
And when the moderates in the Christian religion or the Muslim faith, whatever, any religion, when they don't feel like any time the extremists in their religion committing an act of terror leads to a backlash against them, that makes them more likely to not sympathize in any way with those extreme factions and say, that has nothing to do with me. And the world at large knows that that has nothing to do with me. So instead of being radicalized and thinking of blowing something up, I'm going to go to work today and I'm going to provide for my family and I'm going to contribute positively to society. So we all need to remember that the knee-jerk reaction that it is all of those within a certain religion that are a problem, and this applies to every religion, is just flat out wrong. And we can't forget that, Lewis. And the knee-jerk reactions are very concerning.
It's a concern. It's a problem. What can we really do? You know, we can tell people about this, but we're not going to have sensitivity training for children all throughout schools across the world. This is it's a huge problem.
On Fox News, just after the Charlie Hebdo Paris massacre, they had a discussion about how you can identify so-called typical bad guys, and Fox News anchor and Supreme Court correspondent Shannon Bream reacted to the terror attacks by suggesting that sometimes certain skin tones, certain skin colors, people of certain colors are more likely to be so-called bad guys than are others. This is from the Fox News program Outnumbered. Take a listen to this.
New York cops, I don't feel like they look at me as the enemy. I feel like New York cops, of all the cops in this country, you can go up to them and have a conversation.
You're not a bad guy, though. If I'm a bad guy, I see a heavily armed cop on the corner, I may decide not to do the bad thing I was thinking about doing.
Sometimes bad guys don't look like bad guys.
Right, and that's my question about these guys, because if we know they were speaking unaccented French and they had, ski masks on, do we even know what color they were, what the tone of their skin was? I mean, what if they didn't look like typical bad guys as we define them when we think about terror groups?
Well, that's why this issue in New York is so important.
Right. So, Lewis, you have like the typical bad guy, right? A non-white guy, maybe a blah person, which could be, I actually figured out blah person means black, Latino, Asian, or Hispanic. That's actually what I think Rick Santorum meant when he said blah people. Could be a blah person. Those are kind of like the typical bad guys. And then you have kind of your run-of-the-mill typical good guy who's probably a white guy. Doesn't always happen, but generally speaking, we can get a sense of that. And if we can't see the color of their skin, as Shannon Bream and the gals over at Outnumbered suggest, if we can't see the skin color because they might have a mask on and they spoke French with no accent, it's harder to figure out whether they're good or bad because we just don't know what color they are.
Such a telling clip. And of course, you see this on Fox News. And I think some of the people there are a little taken aback when they hear this.
Yeah, you see some stunned faces there.
Yes, and they quickly pivot and try to get away from this. But yes,
they're like, hey, this is Fox News. We're throwing the thinly disguised racist xenophobia out, but we're not just supposed to be out and out saying you can tell who's a bad guy by their skin color. Even Fox News was given pause as a result of that. And of course, this ignores that most of the terrorists doing terror in the US happen to be white, because then all of a sudden it would throw this theory upside down. Hey, you can tell the typical bad guy in the US because he has white skin. Whoa, wait a second. That's unfair to white people. That's racial profiling, Lewis, and that's really bad.
Well, I think a lot of people do it. I think it's human nature to look at someone whose skin is different color than yours and just assume that they're different from you, or in some cases, assume that they're bad guys.
Yeah, and clearly that is exactly what is happening as a matter of policy, according to many people, that it is merely because of someone's skin that they are being ascertained or suspected of being criminal or somehow less good than someone else. And Shannon Bream saying that very, very directly, and she certainly seems to support that type of profiling. Next, we will talk to Frederick Clarkson about National Religious Freedom Day, and then the latest unemployment numbers. Will the Republicans take credit for them? Because remember, they're in control now. Or will they deny that the numbers are good? What will Republicans do? That's after the interview.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Frederick Clarkson, who's a senior fellow for religious liberty at Political Research Associates. He's also author of Eternal Hostility, the struggle between theocracy and democracy. And our topic today is the quickly upcoming, on January 16th, official National Religious Freedom Day, which was passed by Congress in the early 90s. It's been renewed by presidential proclamation every president since. In your mind, Frederick, what's really the objective of National Religious Freedom Day?
Well, the purpose, as it was written by Congress, was to celebrate the enactment of the Virginia statute for religious freedom in 1786. It was originally drafted by Thomas Jefferson in 1777, fresh from authoring the Declaration of Independence. And he introduced it himself in the Virginia legislature, the revolutionary legislature of 1779, and it kind of languished there. It was a little too controversial, and it took 10 years for James Madison to finally get it through the Virginia legislature in 1786.
And you think that the left should be making a bigger deal out of this day than maybe what has been done in prior years?
Oh, very much so. The idea of religious freedom was one of the most progressive and revolutionary ideas of the age, in a very revolutionary age, the age of enlightenment. What made it so special and so revolutionary was that the bill, for the first time, made the right of individual conscience a right of the citizens, which is to say that the government and powerful religious institutions would have no say and no influence over what you thought or whether you wanted to change your mind. You couldn't be compelled to attend church, nor could you be taxed to support somebody else's clergy. In those days, the Anglican Church, which was serving as a proxy for the British monarchy, was the established church, and it was against the law to, for example, be a Baptist preacher and preach the gospel as you understood it. And Baptist preachers were jailed, beaten and jailed in the streets of Virginia, and witnessed by young James Madison, who was horrified by this. So it's hard to imagine what a de facto theocracy we had in those days in Virginia, and what a revolutionary thing it was for Thomas Jefferson, who was a member of the Anglican Church, to stand up to his own church and say enough.
I can't disagree. I can't agree with you more, rather, that the same, and I actually would argue that that same type of de facto theocracy is what we would have if the desires of many modern religious rightists were to become the law, right? Gay marriage being illegal because that's what Scripture says. Abortion being illegal because that's what Scripture says, and one particular Scripture. At the same time, I have a concern about the left really proactively celebrating this day or in general this concept, because not accurately, but it will happen that the religious right would point to such an exuberant celebration of Religious Freedom Day and say, see, they're trying to oppress us. They're trying to push their anti-Christianity on us. And I say that not because I believe that that would be an accurate accusation, but because we see this happen. We know that, we were just speaking earlier on the show, in fact, about how the Islamist radicals who carried out, for example, what happened in Paris, they want the world at large to actually fight against Islam more broadly, because it will push the moderate Muslims into being radicalized. They benefit from that. And I worry that this could do the same thing.
Well, to borrow from a leader from another age, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You know, the Christian right has had 25 years to seize on Religious Freedom Day, and they haven't done it. And there's a very good reason for that. It doesn't support their narrative of history. Jefferson and Madison understood America was not going to be founded as a Christian nation. And the legislative history on this is actually instructive, because Patrick Henry, the guy who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," had introduced a bill in the legislature to tax Virginian citizens to support Christian ministers. He didn't say what denomination, but he wanted to advance the idea of Christianity with tax dollars. And as a part of fighting against this bill, Madison wrote this famous manifesto called Memorial and Remonstrance. And it was disseminated all over Virginia, and they campaigned against the bill. This opened the door to Madison finally being able to get Jefferson's bill through. And what the bill actually says is that no matter what you may think, and I'm paraphrasing here, whatever your religious views may be, they will neither diminish nor advance your status as a citizen. He called them your civil capacities. So no advantage and no disadvantage. Whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian, whether you're an atheist or a heretic, it would make no difference. This is a slam dunk against the Christian right, and it's been a radical failure of progressives to take full advantage of what Madison and Jefferson and the framers were up to. Keeping this in mind, Madison managed to push this bill through the legislature in 1786, and the following year traveled to Philadelphia as the principal author of the Constitution, which made no mention of religion except once. And that was to say, there'll be no religious tests for public office. A few years later, as a member of Congress, he was the principal author of the First Amendment. So the relevance of the Virginia statute to the way that our government relates to matters of religion is profound. And it's remarkable to me that progressives have not thoroughly owned this and taken it to the Christian right as a powerful debating and talking point, because religious freedom is ours as an issue, and we should never, ever allow the Christian right to take it from us.
Well, you mentioned something interesting there, which was about the idea that you would gain no advantage nor have a disadvantage based on your religion. And I think that there's a very specific test that we can apply to the so-called claims of desire for religious freedom from the American right, which is when the American religious right says, based on my religion, religious freedom means, for example, that I have the freedom as a Christian to take my religious view on homosexuality and live that fully in the public square, right? That would be that they have the freedom to do something. And for me, the question is, are you eliminating someone else's freedom not to have their liberty infringed upon? Meaning, if by you acting on that freedom essentially to discriminate based on your religious views on homosexuality, is someone else who doesn't subscribe to those same views going to have their liberty limited? And very often the answer is yes. And that's where I come to the conclusion, as you have, that much of what is under the umbrella of so-called religious freedom from the American religious right actually restricts that same religious freedom of others.
Well, sure. There's always going to be this kind of a tension. People have the right to be a bigot and a jerk. And, we have the famous instance of Nazis, marching in Skokie, Illinois, which had a large Jewish community and of Holocaust survivors. Do people who have horrible views have the right to express them in public? Absolutely. And reasonable people are going to come down in different places about the proximity of those views. Is hate speech going to be allowed? These kinds of things are normal in a democratic society. This is what pluralism is. The question is not whether we allow terrible views,
right,
or whether we have to shut people up. That's not it at all. The question is whether we develop the knowledge and the skill set to allow these things to happen and to not let us deter us from bringing full equality to everybody, including people who are historically oppressed.
Let me remind everybody, we've been speaking with Frederick Clarkson. He's a senior fellow for religious liberty at the Political Research Associates, also author of Eternal Hostility, The Struggle Between Theocracy and Democracy. January 16th is official National Religious Freedom Day. Frederick, thank you so much for being on. Very interesting.
Thank you very much for having me. Anytime.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, we have new job, employment, and wage numbers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a few days ago that for the 11th consecutive month, more than 200,000 new jobs were created in December of 2014. This made 2014 the best job growth year since the economy started expanding in the summer of 2009. Seasonally adjusted, the economy added 240,000 new private sector jobs in December and 12,000 new public sector jobs. We have now had 58 months of private job sector growth and 51 months of overall job growth. The latter figure is shorter by 7 months because of the layoffs of hundreds of thousands of public sector workers at federal, state, and local levels. You would think, Lewis, the small government conservatives would be standing and applauding President Obama for reducing the government number of public jobs. But no, instead, they are just arguing that the new number of 5.6% unemployment, a very good number, is just not good because it's just not accurate.
Would you stand up and applaud a Kenyan, Indonesian, Muslim, terrorist, fascist, socialist masquerading as an American Christian? No.
Sounds suspicious to me. The Bureau says the economy now has 1.85 million jobs more than there were at the pre-recession peak. Republicans will say either it's a terrible economy or they will just say, yes, that's good. And it's because, as Mitch McConnell said, Republicans are now in power. Of course, these are numbers from December before Republicans took control. But it was the anticipation, Lewis, of Republicans taking over that resulted in these jobs. So let's do all the normal disclaimers, that the normal stuff we hear when we do these stories. Because remember, Mitt Romney said he would need to repeal Obamacare and would need until January of 2017, when he would have left office, or the end of his first term, to get unemployment down to 6%. President Obama, without repealing Obamacare, has us down to 5.6%. So one argument is, David, that's the U3, the U6, which includes discouraged workers and people who are no longer, who are underemployed. That's really, really high. Well, actually, the U6 also fell in correlation with the U3. The U3 fell from 5.8 to 5.6%, and the U6 fell from 11.4 to 11.2%, completely in concert with the other numbers. That argument, put it in the trash, Lewis. It's of no use to us. And then wages. Yeah, wages are a continued issue. Wages rose for several months in a row. They dropped a few cents an hour, the average wage in December of 2014. Wages are a continued issue. They always lag jobs in a recovery. This was a particularly bad recession that we were in. So we would all agree that we need to start seeing an increase in wages, but that typically lags. So those are usually the arguments we hear when we present this data.
It's despite the wage problem, obviously, I don't think anyone would say that it's bad to have a falling unemployment rate.
No, it is bad, Lewis, because it's only because people are no longer looking for jobs, and it's people taking terrible part-time jobs that are of no value, and Obama's just terrible.
Well, you can put any spin on it you want, and depending on how you want to look at our economy, it could be argued that we're still in pretty rough shape. But more people are working. That's a fact.
George Zimmerman, the wannabe police officer who was acquitted in the killing of unarmed teenager who had Skittles and iced tea and a hoodie, Trayvon Martin, in Sanford, Florida, has been arrested again, and this time has had to surrender his weapons. Remember that in September of 2013, he was arrested in a road rage incident when a driver reported that Zimmerman pulled up beside him and said, "Do you know who I am? I will effing kill you." Same month, he was arrested after his ex-wife, Shelley Zimmerman, reported that he was threatening her and that he had punched her father in the nose. Shortly after that, in November, Zimmerman barricaded himself inside his home and pointed a shotgun at his then-girlfriend, Samantha Scheib. Now, the 31-year-old Florida resident was arrested Friday by police in Lake Mary and booked at John E. Polk Correctional Facility because he reportedly threw a wine bottle at his girlfriend, according to his attorney, Don West. Don West said, "It's clear he hasn't been very lucky with the ladies in the last few months." Judge John Galuzzo decided to bar him from contacting the alleged victim or going into Volusia County and said, "You must surrender all of your weapons, however many you have at this point, George, to a relative or a third party." George Zimmerman's attorney, Don West, said, "I certainly wish I wasn't here this morning, as I'm sure he does too. It's been a devastating experience that he's been through. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how it's manifesting itself. I'm concerned, obviously, as we are here again this morning." The lawyer is kind of trying to imply that all of this behavior is from the psychological impact of that terrible time where he was accused of a crime he did not commit. It's also interesting that Don West is there, but no Mark O'Mara. And we've heard a few comments from Mark O'Mara since the end of the big trial that when he was asked, how would you advise George Zimmerman, one of the last times he was arrested, his former attorney, Mark O'Mara, said, "I would advise him to pay me." And there were some comments made in private when I was at this conference where Mark O'Mara attended a few months ago that were not, there wasn't anything big, it wasn't anything newsworthy. But again, just kind of giving you the sense that Mark O'Mara is kind of fed up with George Zimmerman's antics. But Don West, Lewis, is sticking with him and is there with him again.
I can understand his point of view. It's not insane to think that everything he's been through would make him go crazy and perhaps become more violent. But when I read this, I think here's a guy that always had anger problems. And I think that this paints a very bad picture. And I think he probably was very angry when he killed Trayvon Martin. And
That's
I think
right.
he wanted to.
If this were different behavior than what originally got him into trouble, we would say, oh, maybe that kind of was the catalyst for making him go nuts. But this is the same type of thing that happened in that crime of what ultimately was not a crime. I misspoke. In that killing, which was not a crime, as determined by a jury, of Trayvon Martin. The time that he got into an altercation before that with a police officer, it's all the same type of behavior. So to suggest there's been a change since the Trayvon Martin case doesn't really make sense. How does George Zimmerman keep getting all these girlfriends, Lewis?
I think it's just something about the celebrity. Perhaps they think he's just a big shot and they like that his name was in the papers. I really couldn't tell you. I'm not sure.
We have a voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. We haven't heard from San Antonio Troll for a while, but we do have Kansas Troll calling in today. Listen to this.
Hey, David, I have a question. Why is it every time that there's a terrorist attack committed by a Muslim, you never actually mention it's a Muslim terrorist attack? But every time it's a Christian who commits a terrorist attack, a right-winger who commits a terrorist attack, or a white person who commits a terrorist attack, you mention all three of those things every time it happens, but when the Muslim does it, it's just simply a terrorist attack. What?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, sir, your comment is based completely in fantasy. I'm not sure you've ever seen our program. Maybe you meant to leave this message at some other show, because the first day we talked about the Charlie Hebdo attacks, our focus was actually on the Muslim component of it, in spite of the fact that at that time, it wasn't the focus on other media outlets. So I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you've never seen this program and you just leave messages, but my goodness, No connection at all between that voicemail and the reality that we've been discussing. And I would also check out the first 20 minutes of today's show if you need any more reinforcement on that. On today's bonus show, Icelandic whale testicle beer. What does that even mean? Lewis will explain it to us. Fourth graders who plotted to kill their teacher, and police wearing diapers in Manila in the Philippines. Wow, what a bonus show today. Producer Lewis is the host. I'm the sidekick. Get access to the bonus show by being a David Pakman Show member. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to become a member today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.